A couple days ago, I went and picked up the M4 MacBook Air. This is the 15-inch. It's in the midnight color. And the reason I got the 15-inch is because the base 15-inch, well, there's been a price drop, right? So because of that, the base 15-inch is $11.99. If you're a student, it's $10.99. And I think there's tons of value at that price point. Also, the 15-inch base model has the same spec M4 chip as my M4 Mac Mini. The last reason I got the 15-inch is because of the larger screen size. Working off of an ultra-wide monitor all the time, I'm used to having more screen real estate. The previous laptop I had was the M1 Pro MacBook Pro, which I, a couple months ago, replaced with the iPad Pro after buying my M4 Mac Mini. So that 14-inch, as great as it was, I could always use a little bit of a bigger screen, and given that this is at a lower price point now, this was the right choice for me. With all of that out of the way, let's talk about what I've loved, and the number one thing has to be just how lightweight this is. Even though this is the larger size, it's just such a lightweight computer, and I really love that because when I used to carry around the M1 Pro MacBook Pro 14-inch, it's got heft to it, even though there's not a substantial difference between their weight, but you definitely feel it, especially when you're on the move a lot. So having a lighter setup, but also having a bigger screen is a nice plus. Now, one thing I want to point out is I'm very much so like the 95% of the users that are going to be buying this laptop, right? If you're looking at the MacBook Air, you just want a reliable computer that is going to work really, really well for you for many years to come. If you take video editing away out of my picture, then I do everything that anybody else would be doing from a computer. Watching videos, browsing the internet, checking emails, just your day-to-day stuff, right? With video editing, my camera's footage is 10-bit 422. It has to be color graded, so that is the most intensive part of everything I do in terms of workflow. Which brings me to the second thing I love, which is the performance of the M4 MacBook Air. Just several years ago, 2020, in the summer, I bought an Intel MacBook Pro 16 with 64 gigabytes of RAM. There were tons of upgrades that were done to it. It was almost $6,000. But that is the kind of computer you had to buy in order to do stuff like I'm doing now. And you fast forward several years and you've got an ultra lightweight computer with no fans, which is silent, which gives you the capability to do stuff like that. But then also for the average user, it just is a very reliable and great computer. See, the only place this is going to struggle with performance, I've yet to make it struggle because I don't have tons of visual effects or plugins going on with my edits. My edits are pretty simple. I have a talking timeline, and then I have like B-roll footage that I put on top of things that I'm talking about. And that's usually it. A couple of plugins for audio and stuff like that, and that's it. So if you are doing like more extensive stuff, yeah, this might not be the right computer for you. But for me, it's working perfectly fine. And to know that I don't need to spend an X amount to have editing capabilities on the move just gives me tons of freedom. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about this. Now, real quickly, like I did with the M4 Mac Mini, I want to talk about how performance differs in different machines, even though you have the same chip. See, in the M4 MacBook Air, even though you have the same configuration, the difference is there's no active cooling, there's no fans, right? And that is one reason I got a 15-inch, because you have a bigger chassis. So there's more room in here for the internals to kind of just breathe and before they begin to suffocate. It's very similar to if you were in a room that didn't have any windows and I told you to do jumping jacks as long as possible or work out as long as possible, eventually you're going to get exhausted because there's no circulation, you're going to get hot, and that is going to wear you out. That's kind of like what this is. Whereas on something like the M4 Mac Mini, you have a taller chassis, right? So there's more room to breathe. But then on top of that, you've got active cooling going on. You've got a pretty big fan that's cooling the entire system. And till this day, I personally haven't been able to get my M4 Mac Mini's fans to run. So that is very similar to you being in the same kind of room. Maybe it's a little bit bigger, but you also have windows. Now you're going to be able to work out for a lot longer in that room because your body's going to be able to stay cool and you're going to be able to sustain the performance for a longer period of time. So that is one thing. If you are wondering like whether this is going to be able to handle intensive tasks for you, hopefully this example can simplify that for you. Another thing I want to touch up on is screen. And even though you don't have things like ProMotion, and I think a lot of people get so caught up in this whole ProMotion thing. The only time I had a fast refresh rate display, like throughout my life, was when I was really hardcore about gaming and I had bought a gaming specific monitor by Samsung, and it could do up to 244 Hertz, which I didn't even need, right? But it just made my Call of Duty gameplay very, very smooth. And that's it. Other than that, whether it was a TV or whether it was a laptop, all of my devices have never had a fast refresh rate. And it's something that I think we get so caught up in that if you're looking at this MacBook Air, there's a lot of people that will be like, well, if only it had a 120 hertz screen. Yeah, that would be great, but for day-to-day things, you don't need a faster refresh rate. Like, on my iPhone, same is the case. I went from a 16 Pro to a 16e, which in the 16 Pro, you have the faster refresh rate, and here you don't. You don't notice it because you're not using it, right? There are specific cases where you want a faster and smoother display experience. And I get it that on the Pro laptops, you have the mini LED and, it looks great. Don't get me wrong, it's a great display. I used it for 3 years, but I also love the display here. And overall, what always matters for me is functionality. If I can get the functionality that the M1 Pro MacBook was giving me, and I can get it in a cheaper laptop, then why not? That just makes more sense to me. I'm always practical in that sense, to where functionality over features is what I go for. And even though this doesn't have the much better looking screen or the fast refresh rate, right? This is a great screen to look at. And trust me, it's a lot better than a lot of other displays that you'll see. The colors are accurate and it works perfectly fine for me. So there's that in terms of the screen, if you're wondering. I wouldn't have that be a limiting factor for yourself in wanting to spend a little bit more. Plus, if you go to, let's say, the M4 MacBook Pro base model, now you're getting the base chip anyway. It's not like you're getting the Pro chip. To get the Pro chip, you got to go up even higher. And now you're looking at almost twice as much as a 15-inch, but in a 14-inch body. So it just doesn't make sense to me. There are things that you shouldn't get caught up on. If you need a good display, a good performing computer for your day-to-day tasks that's going to last you several years to come, this is great. It's as simple as that. That's the best way I can explain it. For me personally, anytime I come from like a Pro device to a non-Pro device, one of the things that's always going on in my mind is that if there are things that were on that previous device that I don't even notice here anymore, then it probably means that those were nice additions to have, but I probably didn't need them. And that's the case here. This might not have the nicer display of the Pro MacBooks and so, this thing, that thing, whatever, right? But it's more than enough. And trust me when I say that whether you get a 13-inch or a 15-inch, if you go out and buy this, I'm pretty sure this is going to be able to live with you for many years and be a very reliable and a very productive machine for you. If you have any particular questions, drop them in the comments because I will revisit this. The color of this MacBook might change, but overall, I'm definitely going to keep this because it's a great machine and I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for your time. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. comment down below. And like always, take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next video.